Okay, it is started. Go ahead, Co-Chair Washington.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. And Rose, if you could assist me with the roll call, please.
Yes, I can do that. Commissioner Cuddy, Commissioner McCabody Adikai, Vice Chair Phillips, or Co-Chair Phillips, Co-Chair Washington,
Present.
and Commissioner Marks. Commissioner Toya is excused, absent, and Commissioner Weathersby
Present.
and Commissioner White Hat
Here, present.
and Commissioner Yellowhair.
Conde.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. And as far as I know, others that are present is Jenna from Sustainability and Councilmember Shimoni. I think that's all I see right now. And then I will share really quickly the agenda. Here, let's. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
All right. Next is land acknowledgement.
Okay, I will read that. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home. We're now into public comment. Is there anyone in the public that has a comment? If not, then we'll move to approval of minutes. Um, Is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 12th, 2022?
This is Commissioner Weathersby. I make a motion to approve October 12th minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion? I will second the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say
Aye.
nay. Is anybody abstaining? Okay, the motion carries. The minutes for October 12th, 2022 are approved. We now go to Native American Heritage Month.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly share that we are partnering with the Coconino County Employee Diversity Committee, as well as the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Council. So the employees have put together a lot of different workshops, mostly during lunchtime. Like today, they're doing the fried bread taco sale, and that will be sent to you as soon as the county puts all the links in the calendar and on the flyers, however they're doing that. And then we're doing, from our city side, we're going to do two. One will be on the 28th of November on Monday, and that will be Commissioner Weathersby will be doing influence of federal boarding school on Indigenous relatives. And then there'll be some discussion on that for the purposes. I know a lot of you won't be able to attend some of these sessions, so that will be kind of our talking point today. And then on the 29th, there'll be elderhood teachings. And I'm putting that kind of a small panel together, maybe 2 or 3 people, to talk about some of the things from their experience. And then just some of us, the week of the 14th is also Rock Your Mocks. So if you have moccasins from any nation, from any people. You can wear it that week, or you can, the original day was November 15th, but you can wear it either that day or any day during that time. So just want to, and also on November 6th, which is this coming Sunday, IPAC and some of our Indigenous commissioners are involved in that Indigenous Community Connection at the Cultural Connection down on at the Ice House near right next door to the post office, downtown post office. So those are some of the quick things I wanted to share with you.
This is Commissioner Weathersby. One of the things for the Rock Your Mocks is for relatives whose communities do not wear moccasins. The initiative is to wear a turquoise ribbon in honor of Heritage Month or Rock Your Mocks. Because I know like our O'odham relatives, they have, you know, their sandals and different attire that they wear rather than moccasins.
Thank you. And I know also NAU has a lot of other activities going on too, so you can just pretty much go on their websites to see what's going on with their students and their faculty and staff members over there.
Yes, I can put a link to our or a PDF, an accessible PDF in the chat. And then one of the things that's not on that chat is the Aaron Yazzie, who is Diné and works for NASA, will be here at the university on the 17th. To share about his experience as a mechanical engineer, being a native mechanical engineer and working on the Mars rover. So that's also an opportunity that we can share out.
And he's the one who named the rover with the Navajo name, right?
That's possible. I'm not certain.
Okay.
But I know that they did do the many of their practice runs on the Navajo Nation because of the terrain.
And I think that's all we have unless somebody else has something to add. I don't know, Jonathan, is NACA doing anything?
Oh yeah, we are, and I could forward flyers regarding it, because NACA is actually partnering with NAU and regarding their football game and everything with the beanies and such, and so we have a couple other events, and I can just email the flyers to everybody so that y'all are in the know in regard to it.
You can send it to me and I'll see if I can collect it with the county and ours and email it out to people.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I'll send it to you too.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, because I can't attach a document to the chat.
Okay, just send it to me.
I will.
Right. I think that's all we have on that topic, Chair, Co-Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then upcoming nomination, election of co-chairs and expiration of terms.
Okay, there's two commissioners, voting commissioners that their terms are coming up in December. And we just need to see if those individuals can maybe recruit somebody or up to all of us to recruit two people, or if they're willing to reapply, that would be the ultimate thing to do and will be so welcomed. So those are Co-Chair Phillips and Commissioner Weathersby. So if you both can reapply, that will really solve our problems. And you're also just welcome to let us know if that's what you intend to do. That way we'll have some time to make sure that we have commissioners that are going to reapply. And normally we had heard that if it's a reapplying commissioner, it's well received by council. So just wanted to put that out there. Welcome, Greg. Do you want to say something?
Oh, I'll just wish everybody a good afternoon. Thank you, Rose.
Okay,
And then,
Go
and
ahead.
then also there's also going to be, we're going to have elections of the co-chairs who are going to start in January. So that will be on the agenda for December.
Rose, I have a question. So if I reapply, would then that be another 2-year appointment?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Adam, normally they're 2 and 3 years, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
City manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, it's usually 2 and 3 years. And I do understand. I'm under the impression that if commissioners and or council members were to vacate their seat halfway through their term or whenever, for whatever reason, we just go about appointing that remainder of that term. So I think it is a 2-year commitment at least, but if for whatever reason you can only do a year of that, I think we make do with what we can get, you know?
Mm-hmm. And also to add to that is that, and I'll find out for sure from Stacy Fobar as to what the terms are for, because you were on for 2 years. And so what would be the next one, the next term for those that are termed with 2 years. The other thing is that you can stay on until, if you decide to leave, but you can stay on until there's a replacement. But otherwise, you can always reapply just to solidify that seat.
Okay,
Rose,
that's helpful.
Go ahead.
I had gotten the impression that the commissioners' terms were 3 years, and that the 2-year terms were simply to establish a staggering on the commission, so that everybody didn't go off on the same time. And so it was my thought, and you could check on this, that so after doing a short term, the next term would be the full 3-year term. And so it just establishes a staggering on the commission.
That, I know there was a 1-year term, and that those two have been filled. I know that was, it expires the first go around. So when a commission is established, there's a 1-year term, a 2-year term, and a 3-year term.
Right.
And then the 1-year term goes away once the commission is established. And then after that, then that's the part where I need to find out if it's going to remain a 2-year term or go to a 3-year term.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We go into discussion items, which is the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report.
And yes, and that will be, have you had a chance to read the information that was sent out? I know it was a pretty hefty amount of pages, but we just wanted to have a little bit of time to see how that information will support what we're doing with the commission in order to help our relatives, those that have gone through the system, that have survived or are touched by trauma because their relatives did not return. And so I wanted to give the floor to Commissioner Weathersby to just kind of start that conversation.
Thank you, Rose. So the Federal Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report was released in May of this year. And it was originally requested by the Honorable Deb Haaland, who is our Secretary of Interior, on June 22nd, 2021. And as I read, it's a 106-page document. One of the things that stood out to me, well, there's numerous things that stood out to me from the investigative report, but it is based on, the scope of it is locations, burial sites, and identification of students who attended the schools. And what the report indicates is that from 1819 to 1969, and this is the first volume of this report, it shows that there were 431 sites, but 408 boarding schools were on these sites. And then that's across 37 states. And there were 21 schools in Alaska and 7 schools in Hawaii. And through this first volume, they found that there were 53 grave sites, marked and unmarked, with an initial analysis of 500 plus children deaths. And so through this 150 years of federal policies to assimilate Indigenous children through these federal boarding schools, I wanted to return to the Indigenous Commission. And, the report that we did, the establishment of this commission here for the city of Flagstaff, and how we were created to advise council. And looking at this document, this first volume, and aligning it with what is going, our key recommendations to City Council back in 2017. And those were for visibility, economic inclusion, Indigenous, the community cultural center, education, public safety, criminal justice, wellness, housing, and transportation. And as we went through those key recommendations, we identified the different areas that we have looked at as the Indigenous Commission. And some of the key recommendations that we were still wanting to look at moving forward were about education, housing, transportation, wellness, and environmental justice. And so when we look at this investigative report and the ways in which our community members have been impacted by the federal boarding schools, I wanted to utilize the language. How can we tie in the language, tie in this investigative report with the ways that we make recommendations to the city council in regards to education? And so my initial thoughts are about the enrollment of children as young as 4, right? And that even there were rules in place for laws for compliance all the way up to folks age of 29 years of age. And so thinking about from 4 years old to 29 years of age, from 1819 to 1916, or 1969, that all of these people were impacted. Some of them didn't return home, but many did, who were harmed while at these schools that were policies of the federal government. And thinking about the way in which we have now moved to, we're 2022, right? But knowing that up until 1924, we weren't considered citizens and didn't have the right to vote. And then 1978, where we were finally not prohibited from practicing our cultural teachings, whether that's language, songs, and cultural practices. And then to 1990, where our language was no longer prohibited. And thinking about now in 2022, where we're at as far as helping relatives to attain their educations, whether that's at public schools or going through to post-secondary schools, and that knowing that here in the city of Flagstaff, we still have the Kintlana dorms, but also that we also have Northern Arizona University, which is working toward being the leading institution serving Indigenous peoples. And thinking about how we are struggling for our students to persist in their pursuit of a collegiate degree. And so I wanted to have a conversation with the commissioners in regards to this first volume and talk about the ways in which I know that we have NACA, who has our relatives who are working, front facing with community members, helping with the healing. But in thinking about conversations that we've had about supporting folks with Taros and that supporting relatives who are navigating, who are unsheltered, and the understanding that they themselves might be survivors of these federal boarding schools. They might be children of survivors, or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of survivors. And the ways in which the system of the federal Indian boarding schools enacted their rules, right, through different punishments. And the report shares those punishments in details. I believe it's on page 54 of the document. It shares that Indian boarding schools rules were often enforced through punishment, including corporal punishment, such as solitary confinement, flogging, withholding food, whipping, slapping, or cuffing. And at times, rule enforcement was a group experience. For the first offense, unless a serious one, a reprimand before the school is far better than a dozen whoopings, because one can teach the whole school that the offender has done something that is wrong, and they all know it and will remember it, while it is humiliating to the offender and answers better than whipping. Federal Indian boarding schools also conducted discipline at times by making older children to punish younger children. When offenses have been serious enough to demand corporal punishment, cases have generally been submitted to a court of the older pupils, and this has proved a most satisfactory method. Describing the practice of trying boys guilty of any serious offense by a court-martial using the older and more intelligent as a court, the department has acknowledged the members of the court-martial are detailed with the cadet officer's care being taken to secure an impartial selection from various tribes. Charges are preferred against the prisoner. The court examines witnesses, hears the defense, fixes the degree of guilt, and recommends a punishment. So part of that indicates that the department recognized that at the Kickapoo boarding school in Kansas, runaways, both boys and girls, were frequent during the first half of the year. Corporal punishment was resorted to, and the habit being of long standing was not entirely overcome, but I am convinced that a prompt returning of the runaways and a whipping administered soundly and prayerfully helps greatly toward bringing about the desired result. The department has acknowledged frankly and unequivocally that the provisions for the care of the Indian children in boarding schools are grossly inadequate. Rampant physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, disease, malnourishment, overcrowding, and lack of health care in Indian boarding schools are well documented. So I read that to us as a commission. I know many of us are aware of that, but because this is an open meeting, I read that so that we can name the things that are impacting our relatives, that are impacting our community, and have conversations about the ways in which Indian people, including children, hold a distinct political status, and the ways that we can align our recommendations to the city of Flagstaff based upon the accurate history that has occurred in our communities and to our relatives, so that we can have comprehension and empathy for one another and for our relatives who are navigating their pain and trauma throughout this region, to help to hopefully have a positive influence from such a systemic identity altering assimilation that has happened, that we have been kept from, that there are bills in place right now for folks to not have to reconcile or hear or learn about the historical accuracies of what has occurred throughout our nation, and here in our city. And so that's why I wanted to have some time with the commission to discuss the ways that we can align our recommendations for the future, and leaning on this first volume from the Department of Interior. The last pieces that I'll share is that Arizona had the second greatest concentration of federal Indian boarding schools, 12% of the total student population, and that this report, again, is the first volume because it's from just under 100,000 sheets of paper, because the American Indian Records Repository, where they are housed, is 1.3 million cubic feet underground. And there are approximately 500 million documents in this repository that have not yet been digitized, that we do not yet have the information from those. And so with that, I'd like to ask if anyone has had the opportunity to read this initial report, and if there are any things that you see that we might align with the work that we're doing here as a commission.
This is
Chris,
Joe Washington.
I'll go ahead, Joe.
Go, no, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, go ahead, Joe. That was my only comment. So
I see. I see. Yes, I think as a commission, we could, bring to the fore what, what has happened. And there is continuing effects. There is such a thing as historical trauma, and that has affected whole communities of Indigenous people, and it carries through the generations, that uh, the abominations that were visited upon our grandparents and parents and so on like that has had some effect on us, and even today. And I think it would be good for the commission to, this is a hefty document, and I haven't read it, and the but I think it's something that we need to kind of um, summarize, or take some of the items that have been mentioned, which as has been pointed out, there was some ghastly things going on. I think those need to be mentioned, and then proposing some solutions and so on like that. I think that needs to be done, and I think it is important to address. If we don't address it, then it stays out there. Um, it's like a boil that needs to be lanced or something, so that it needs to be talked about. And the mention of forbidding people to talk about these things, I think, is wrong. And I think we just need to step in and start talking about these things. So those are my comments.
Yes, Co-Chair Washington, one of the things that I didn't mention is that there was a National Institutes of Health study that is pointed out. It's in page 88 of the investigative report that examines the relationship between American Indian boarding school child attendance and physical health status. And it found that Indian boarding school child attendees had a 44% greater count of past year chronic physical health problems as adults compared with adult non-attendees, and that the now adult attendees were more likely to have cancer more than 3 times, tuberculosis more than twice, high cholesterol 95%, diabetes 81%, anemia 61%, arthritis 60%, and gallbladder disease 60% than non-attendees. And so, yes, intergenerational trauma but also how can we look at this as a way that for intergenerational healing, and how do we look at our persistence and as a people that we're still here even though these atrocities have happened, and having that time to talk about, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and unresolved grief. So thank you for bringing that up as well.
Thank you.
This
Any,
is Commission. Go ahead.
I was going to say, anyone else
Yeah.
have any
And
comments?
this is Commissioner Yell here. And first off, I'd like to say, yeah, sister, thank you for bringing this up. And, I think this is a very important conversation for us to be having. I know when this report, or when the information for this report was starting to get released and everything, the groups I facilitate here, at NACA, there's a lot of folks who, were, when we check in, they were upset about it, and justifiably so. I think for us as natives, right, we all know people in our families that have been to boarding school, but when they started finding these mass graves up in British Columbia, it was kind of hard to get that validation. Like, yeah, this is for real, and this is what was going on. And a lot of folks were struggling with that in groups and processing it, myself as well. You know, um, with I know I saw a picture that came up, and it was like these Catholic nurses, feeding these native babies, in one of these boarding schools. And man, I started crying, and I broke down, and I was like, man, because of course now I'm a dad, and I was like,
Mhm.
I cried, and I was like, how could someone take, my son, like he's the same age as them, like how could people do this? And then, went to like, how could people do this to my dad, when he was younger, and it was a lot of processing. And I think there is a need to address these things. Because some clients themselves in group are like, yeah, I went to boarding school and never really processed it. So we're actually looking at getting a group going, for folks who have been to boarding school. But our capacity for programming right now is not at NOC and behavioral health is very limited, because we're just, overflowing with clients since NASA's closed, and as well as mountain counseling not doing groups and stuff. And so we're still kind of trying to manage that massive influx of clients. But I think a way to look at it could be that potentially of looking at programming or partnering with other agencies to get clients, maybe for a potential group. But also, I think it's imperative to address, the historical dynamics of it and this trauma that exists between Native folks and education. And I think you said it right off the bat. There's ways that we can address that right now in the community. Anybody that knows an RA that's worked at the dorms here in Flag, or it was one themselves, can tell you there's some very serious mental health issues going on in those dorms, and every year they really struggle to hire tutors. They struggle to get programming in there for these students. But at the same time, at NAU, here you have these other students who experience imposter syndrome, feel like they're not giving back to the community enough, and everything like that. And so there could be potential connection between those. I had a client the other day who goes to NAU, and they said to me, they're like, I feel like I'm in a great major, I'm doing really good, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything for my community. The other day, someone disclosed to me that they were molested as a child, and I felt powerless to talk to them or help them. So in that way as well, potentially getting some mentorship to these high schoolers, but giving our young adults a chance to mentor themselves, and help their fellow natives out. And simultaneously, maybe there's some sort of way we can look into getting mentorship for the college students. I know when I was at NAU, I was a mess. Man, I was an alcoholic. I was really struggling, in that way. And what really did help me was the mentors that were there. Marina Vasquez, and people that supported me. And so,
Mhm.
and I think that's really tough there, especially as well too, because there's a lot of natives that go to NAU, but I know young Native men especially struggle at NAU too, because Native men in education, there's just not many going through the system, and so I think there's multiple ways we could look at this, addressing it from helping those that are seeking help with groups, potentially helping the students that are experiencing the systemic issues with Indigenous people in education, and because it is tough, because I do work with older clients too in my work who've been to boarding school, and it's really tough working with them. And I think Rose can speak to this too. It's hard working with them because a lot of them, they don't see it as traumatic, of what they went through. They just kind of saw it as normal. Like, clients joke around, oh, they'll laugh about it, like, oh yeah, I remember when, the priests or nuns used to throw rocks at us at the playground, and everything like that. That's where I got this scar from. And it's like me hearing that, I'm like, that's so morbid, but then they just that they don't see it as such because they've pushed it down so much. And so, but I'm glad this conversation's happening. So yeah, and I'm very appreciative of everybody that's here, and so that's my kind of 2 cents that kind of ended up being $1.02. So, but I'll send Rose an invoice for that. So.
One of the things that is also mentioned in this document is how the more language experienced young men experience more physical and sexual abuse in boarding schools than women. And so I think that's also part of the conversation that we're missing, because we have conversations about missing murdered Indigenous women, but we are not having a conversation about our men, our brothers, who have experienced this violence in this way and that are working toward healing. And so I know that we only have a couple minutes left in our meeting, but I just appreciate everyone for being here today, for even just listening to this hard truth and processing it, and working together for healing for our community, but also for ourselves, because we all have, every single Indigenous person has somebody who has experienced this trauma, and may, even if they didn't experience it directly, have been indoctrinated or have felt this trauma. And so I'm glad that we have an opportunity, as hard as it is, to have these conversations, to work toward an comprehension and empathy from our relatives who are right now ignorant to this information. And the last thing that I will share from this document was that there were, between 1722 and 1869, it notes that the British Crown and United States forcibly signed over 1 billion acres of land under duress through 374 treaties. And so I'd like that to also be part of that conversation that we talk about, and that's the importance of having land acknowledgements, but also moving past land acknowledgements to reconciliation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Weathersby. And thank you for leading this discussion and your comments. It's very, very important, and we would appreciate it.
Joe, can I add just
Yes.
one little thing? What I wanted to say was, just because of a lot of the when our people came back from these boarding schools who are survivors, and those that were very traditional, that's why a lot of these places that are sacred to them are very important, because those are the only places that they could go to feel safe, to feel like Creator is there for them, to go through this healing process. And I just wanted to add that, because it's really important for our leadership to know that sacred spaces and sacred places are so important to this healing piece of most of these conversations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rose. Okay, are there any informational items to and from commissioners, staff? If not, then we are at 1 o'clock, and so we will adjourn the meeting at this time. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Appreciate it. You're muted, Rose. Oh, Councilmember Shimoni, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Co-Chair Washington. I just wanted to thank the commission, and especially Commissioner Weathersby, for leading this discussion and having it with all of us. And I'm grateful that our city manager is here as well. The work you're talking about and the topics we're talking about are so big and so heavy, but so important that the council and the city addresses and recognizes head on. And I fully support the commission working towards action steps and better education and reconciliation here in Flagstaff. And it's just an honor to be amongst you all. And it's really a heavy topic, and it's a very challenging topic, but it's one that we must address. And we have to face these things head on. So just grateful for the leadership and the conversation had today. Thank you. And come get some pizza at City Hall.
Sounds good. Okay. I also want to thank City Manager Clifton for being here. It's really nice to see you here, and thank you for your interest and involvement. Okay. At this time, we will adjourn the meeting, and thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
y'all.
great
See y'all.
day.
It is 1:03.